My name's Emily Chavez. Nice to meet you. I chose the second option for my final paper, and that's about women's representation in the media, how the media can impede women, how it can be a tool for women, as well as 3 roles that I would have if I were a campaign manager for a female candidate running for office. So I knew that for the second option, many people would be using the Friedkin and Kenny source mainly, so I tried to use other sources to help prove my points, and I did use Friedkin and Kenny in my paper, but there's a balance between it and all of my other sources. The sources I used included a chapter in the 2003 book Anticipating Madam President called The Lipstick Watch, Media Coverage, Gender, and Presidential Campaigns, an article posted by Professor Woodall in the course by Kittleson and Friedkin on gender candidate portrayals in election campaigns, the Cornbrook book, Notes from the Cracked Ceiling, The Lawless Book, It Still Takes a Candidate, an article in The New Yorker about Angela Merkel written by George Packer, and a 2013 New York Times article by Jennifer Steinhauser on women gaining power in the Senate. So I started off my paper by talking about how media representation is a hurdle for all candidates in America because the election process here is a bit tougher on candidates and not so much parties because of our winner-take-all system, the focus on candidates shines a spotlight on candidate flaws, successes, and personality, and that's mentioned in The Changing Face of Representation by Friedkin and Kenny. And the news has a huge influence on that spotlight because the news connects voters to the candidates, and there are several sources that I found that state explicitly that there is still gender bias in news representation, including It Still Takes a Candidate, Notes from the Cracked Ceiling, etc. And so my thesis is that political sexism in the media has survived in the 21st century and continues to deter women from entering in the political arena in America and around the world. However, general media coverage of political candidates is closer today to gender equality than in the 20th century and can be used as a tool for women in politics to gain success. And so I opened the essay, the body paragraph, the first body paragraph, with a quote that I liked from It Still Takes a Candidate: "Running means there's no privacy in your life." I think it's funny because it's true that in America, when you're running for a political office, pretty much anything is fair game in your life, whether it be related to politics or not at all. And so I talked about how women are given criticisms that you wouldn't really hear about men. For example, a spokesperson for Elizabeth Dole got really upset when someone asked her about her wearing heels throughout a parade and said men don't get questions about their footwear, which I thought was funny because they really don't. Another example of that includes Nancy Pelosi being called Tom DeLay in a skirt and the B word, and I talked about how those terms are more degrading to the woman's character than her political viability, and how speaking about female candidates in that way makes a campaign seem more like a joke when these women work really hard to campaign or serve their office. My second topic is about different ways that news in itself can impede women's representation. Right now, men dominate the news industry, and I think that contributes a lot to sexism in the portrayal of women in politics. Right now, there are 2 big names, Diane Sawyer, Katie Couric, that are female lead solo anchors on major news networks, but there's not very many other women who have as much influence or are as recognized as them. And it's mentioned in Anticipating Madam President that the presented women covering Geraldine Ferraro's campaign in 1984 and Elizabeth Dole's in 2000 didn't change very much at all, and that was over 16 years. So the representation of women actually working in the media has not increased very much. Also, Kittleson and Friedkin mentioned that the typical 30-minute local news broadcast has about 36 seconds worth of political coverage. So when it comes to people who only watch local news and don't watch late-night, longer news segments, they're not getting all the information that they need, and if that information is not substantive, then they're not going to know very much at all about their candidates, and they're going to base their voting and their opinions on things that aren't really related to political viability. And my last reason for the media preventing women from running is double standards, which we mentioned a lot in the course. And I'm just going to go over that quickly because I feel like we're all pretty familiar with it. The fact that women have to be tough, but not too tough, attractive, not too attractive. And then 2 examples that I used of that were Angela Merkel and Irene Sayes. Angela was made fun of for her hairstyle because it wasn't stylish enough. And then Irene was made fun of because she was too beautiful. How could she possibly be smart enough to be a presidential candidate? And so both these women were disadvantaged by their looks in the opposite ways, but neither parts of their appearance were very important to their political viability. So that's another big hurdle that women have to come over. So the two ways that I talked about the media helping women or supporting them entering politics was reporting about policy success. One example that stood out to me really clearly was, even though he is not a female, Obama's military's success in killing Osama bin Laden. After that event, the coverage on that was really positive, and it helped boost the president's approval for a short time. And I also mentioned articles like the one in the New York Times that talk about the advances women are making, because articles like that inspire other women to follow suit in advancing women in politics. Choosing the roles that I would set if I were a campaign manager was really difficult, because I don't know if I could or ever would do it, even though I would love to be a part of the movement to put women into office, just because I know it's a really hard job. So if I was a campaign manager, I would do everything I could to remove sexism from the equation. If there were ever a public statement made that is sexist or offensive and receives widespread attention, I would make sure that a statement would be issued to the news and social media reprimanding such unprofessional behavior. If a question would be asked of my candidate, that would not be asked of a male candidate, something that is obviously biased in gender. I would try to get my candidate to state that the question was gender biased and have the interviewee recognize that, and then proceed to talk about something about her that politically is relevant and is a fact, so that it doesn't seem like she's just deflecting from answering uncomfortable questions. And I would also be really careful of the tone of my candidates' campaign ads, because I recognize that the double standards are really evident when the person themselves is showing themselves in their own light. And I tried my best to find a balance between the double standard of masculinity and femininity by providing examples of both how they can be tough and how they have a softer side to them in every ad. And then I concluded my essay by saying that although parity in the representation of women in politics is not here yet, it will come soon. And as long as there are women that are willing to endure all the obstacles that face a candidate and all the obstacles that face a female candidate as well, there will definitely be gender equality in the near future. So that was my essay. Thank you for watching.